140 for the rapper, busy man shit, nigga. They take their head off, nigga.
I pray what Eve did to Adam, I just pray my love don't lie to me. Swing the iron like Samson, I can't let no holder lie to me. I don't feel these rappers, all they lies is hypocrisy. Ain't no competition, ain't no rivalry. Nigga think I'm playing, I don't hear one word they saying, this shit light work. Think Muhammad one of us, he might lose his life first. Circle up and stay alert, another cop just stretch the nigga. He a demon, this an exorcism, watch I bless the nigga. You took that open blood, then you know I'm gon' get active with you. Fuck the opposition, I see vision, let me paint the picture. Rappers claim they spit and I ain't listening, is in fact the If revenge was a woman, now I stroke that bitch like Jack the Ripper. War, we gon' run the summer, it's gon' be historical. Thought they making plays, made them niggas call the audible. Ask who run this shit, but that question is rhetorical. Bitch, I'm the one, me cookies with the oil. I'ma get them crackers, hell, should've never kidnapped my family. I came to do damage, bet I be the last nigga standing. Do a life sentence for my niggas, pray you understand me. I might put a switch on this Glock and call it young baby. How you real triggering on them dots? You a bird feeder, claiming he a demon. What's a demon to a cold leader? What he saying something, I ain't hear him, this shit life. It ain't about who got the gun, it's about who gon' up that pipe first. I turn a bad situation to a game changer. Bring soldiers from the dead, just raised up the chain. Free shots, I'ma look like Aaron Jones when I run it. Never bite the hand that feeds you, you won't never get that hand back. He bitchin' about 10%, I don't wanna hear none of that. He dropping sword, fuck him, just make sure you get that cover back. Look around, he ain't with us, probably cause he never was. Now my chin like you with the angels for your brothers. Everybody wanna be Richard Porter, God kill him like Alpo. Play if he want, it's laying in the trunk like Lee Malvo. I'm a certified woman's ass nigga, I am not a toy. Hey, I with that hollow sign, yeah, this the rim accord. Feel like Gullah Jack when I'm in Fayetteville, you feel your boy. Still about my brain, still I think that's all that I enjoy. The way I get that boy lost, they gon' start to call him Elroy. Fuck his game, pop out on them demons like I'm Hellboy.
Mic check, mic. Lucky. Mic check, mic check. Alright, Shalom Israel, Salaki. Shalom Israel, Yahba Shem Yahshua Baruch all the brothers, Shalom Yahshua Baruch Shem Yahshua all the sisters. The Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge started out at 1 West 125th Street, all in New York, under Commanding General Yohana. The Friday night Lashawan Qadash class, where we get into the scriptures, we get into our culture from a linguistics perspective. You know what I'm saying? We get into these scriptures and break down the language so that we can take back our culture and get our oppressive culture and language out of our mouths, man. Alright, so we're gonna get right on into it. Last week, or for the past couple weeks, we were kind of going over basically just basic things that, you know what I'm saying, you're gonna need to know to be able to form sentences, right? So it's things that we didn't review, things that we didn't went over in depth over the past couple months since starting the Lashawan Qadash class in Killeen. Things we've gone over in depth. We just kind of did a little review so that we can refresh our minds and kind of make our notes a little bit more concise so that we can actually start applying the things that we learn. You know what I mean? It's cool to be in class, but if we can't, you know what I'm saying, apply what we learned in class, then we kind of working backwards, all right? So for the past couple weeks, we've been doing this, right? As you can see, last week we went over, we touched on who, what, when, where, and why, and how, right? So combining this with all the other things that we've been reviewing for the past couple of weeks, we're going to be able to form questions, right? Most of our communication starts with questions, you know what I'm saying? You see your brother, you say, hey, Shalom, what's good? You know what I mean? Or you say, what you doing, what you up to? how you been? How's your family? How's your father? How's your mother? Things like that. You usually 9 times out of 10 when you approach your brother and start a conversation, it's gonna start with a question. So it's very important that we understand how to say who, what, when, where, why, and how, so that we can open up that line of communication. And then from there, you know what I mean, as you start to form new questions, like we speak English now, if you want to try to translate it into Lashawan Qadash, you would just have to think like, okay, I want to say this to a brother. Well, how do I say, how do you say, what's good to a brother? You say it in English, how you say what's good in Lashawan Qadash. You would just translate it from there. And that's how you're going to build your vocabulary, right? So it's very important to understand this. We got who, maya, what, ma, when, mataya, where, ayah, why, madawai, and how, kama, right? Kama, as we went over last week, is built off of what? Ka is a prefix or a preposition that means like, right? So you got kama, you break it down. Ka meaning like, ma is what? You got like what, or English translation how, right? Right. Just a quick review. If you have any notes from last week, I highly recommend kind of making like a glossary or like an index that you could, like a study index with these real quick notes that we've been reviewing for the past couple weeks. Because these past couple things that we've been going over is going to be the foundation of being able to actually speak the Lashawan Qadash. Alright? And just to review, we're going to go over a couple of those things. Alright? Before that, we're going to start off with, you know what I mean, we reviewed last week. We're going to review with the Lashawan Qadash alphabet, and then we're going to get into the lesson. So we got from A to Ta, we got A, Ba, Ga, Da, Ha, Wa, Za, Kha, Ta, Ya, Ka, La, Ma, Na, Sa, I, Pa, Taza, Kwa, Ra, Sha, and Ta. Alright, so off the top of your head, you should be able to recite it off the top of your head with practice and with studying, right? Especially if you've been in a Sabbath service or during the feast days when you're reading from the Lashawan Qadash. Having that practice, it helps to be able to memorize the Lashawan Qadash from A to Ta. But that's definitely a skill that you're going to want to have, especially as a priest, right? And we also have the printout as well. So if you don't have that in your notes, it'd be best to have that also. We got, where was we at? So we just reviewed last week. We went over the Lashawan Qadash. Now real quick before we go into the next part, right? We gonna review just real quick like we've been over the last couple weeks. We just gonna review real quick what we done touched on. Alright? So we got, first of all, like we went over, like we've been going over consistently, right? This is gonna be your formula for how you break down the clusters of characters that you see in the text when you're reading out of Blue Letter Bible or Bible Hub or whatever text that you're reading from. But to be able to break down those clusters of characters that you see or phrases, you're gonna need this formula to be able to decipher those or be able to navigate through the Lashawan Qadash. So and none of these again are gonna be in any particular order, but all of them are equally as important. All right, so you're gonna want to understand your prepositions, which are here. These never leave the board, right? And I've also taken the initiative to, you know what I mean, underline some of the ones that occur most often, right? So if you're reading the Lashawan Qadash, if you're, you know what I'm saying, reading Sabbath service or during feast day services, right? You're gonna see exactly what I'm talking about with this formula, and you're gonna see a lot of these prepositions, and you're gonna see a lot of these prepositions come up often, right? Repeatedly, especially in Leviticus 23, right, where it says, and the Most High said, and the Lord said to Moses, and the Lord spake to Moses, saying, right, in the Lashawan Qadash, Wayad Dabar, Yahweh al Mashah la Amar, right? You'll see Wayad Dabar, right? La Amar as well, right? You'll see that over and over again. Waya meaning and, he, and then La Amar meaning to say, right? So you'll see those. Let me put a underline under this one as well, because this is gonna be one that you see often as well. But you're gonna need to understand what these mean when you see them in the Bible hub, right? And then also you got your possessors. Those are gonna come after your root word. Your prepositions come before your root word. Your possessors come after your root word. It's pretty much the same concept. You got, you're gonna want to get familiar with these as well, so that you don't A, mix these two up when you see them, and then B, so that you can be more fluent in reading it. And also you're gonna want to, just like in the prepositions, you're gonna want to get familiar with the ones that pop up most often, right? If you're reading in the Sabbath service or during feast days, you're gonna see these pop up often, and then that's how you get more familiar with it. Right. So once you get familiar with it, it's really easy. It's really easy once you just put that repetition in, and then you got your root word, right? Some of these, as we went over the past couple weeks, some clusters or some phrases, they might have a combination of all of these things. Some phrases might have just a preposition with a root word. Some might just have a root word. Some might just have a root word with tenses, which is going to be the next thing we're going to review real quick. So tenses are the things that change the root word. So you got your present tense, or you got your Salaki, you got your doing tense, which would be talking about what a root word is doing or what's being done, revolving around the root word. You got your feminine tense, you got your pluralization tenses, you got your servile tenses, and you're talking about rank in order. You have you got your past, present, and future tense. So you want to look out for those as well. All right. So we're gonna do this review real quick, and then after we do the review, within the next couple weeks, we're gonna get into depth with past, present, and future, because those are gonna be a little bit different, right? But you're gonna want to understand your tenses as well, as far as like the ones that we also see common, like the Y in the middle of the word, which is gonna be your doing tense, like with the Lashawan Qadash, right? Lashawan is the root word. Lashawan, that Y in the middle is the tense, meaning what is Lashawan means tongue. Lashawan is talking about what is the tongue doing, just for an example. All right, so this is gonna be your formula. It's gonna be excellent to memorize it. You need to put it in your notes. What I recommend is just have like a sheet, a general sheet in the front or the back of your notebook, where you just have this general glossary of notes that you can that you can refer to. It's like general information that you're going to keep in mind, and then take your more in-depth notes, you know what I'm saying, following after it. But I would recommend keeping this and the following things that I'm about to talk about in a page in the front or the back of your notebook. All right, so you got those things, and then a big part of your vocabulary, once you understand this concept right here, then the next thing that we're gonna talk about is just gonna be just parts of your vocabulary. Again, things that we went over in depth in past classes, but just so we can get a general idea of what we're gonna wanna get under our belt, just make a list of those things in your in that index that we was talking about earlier. And then if you want to sharpen up or hone in on a particular topic or a particular topic of your vocabulary, then you can just go back and watch those classes, ask your questions, or whatever you need to do, so we can all be on the same page. So we got and we went over this in the past portions of this review as well, so should already have a running list. just gonna review real quick, right? So you got your, like we went over earlier, your characters, right? So I just went over Abba Gada Hawaza Kata Yaka Lama Nasa I Pataza Kwa Rashata, right? You should be very comfortable with saying the Lashawan Qadash alphabet from A to Tha, right? And if that's not the case, then it wouldn't hurt to just practice, take that sheet, and just go from A to Tha. Remember, we read the Lashawan Qadash from right to left as opposed to left to right in your oppressor's kingdom, right? And also with the characters, you want to practice penmanship as well, right? And that's a big part of it. It's a big part of it. It's one thing to know the Lashawan Qadash alphabet from A to Tha, but when you get up there during Sabbath service and you're reading the characters, a lot of times we can mistake one character for another, or whatever the case is, or we might not be so good at distinguishing those characters at the end, those 5 characters at the end that change, right? So the only way to be able to be proficient in identifying those things is practicing the penmanship, practicing writing it, practicing reading the Lashawan Qadash. Make your mistakes at home. You know what I mean? Especially we got a feast day coming up on the 29th, or the 27th, I believe. But we got a feast day coming up, and we're gonna have to do Leviticus 23 again. You know what I mean? Or a Sabbath service coming up this weekend, like it does every week, right? But before Sabbath service, right? You just read through the Lashawan Qadash. It doesn't matter what chapter, verse, or whatever the case is, whatever book, chapter, verse in the Old Testament. Just practice reading through it. Get familiar with seeing the characters and fumbling, right? Making mistakes at home, and then once you make those mistakes, you can correct those mistakes. Ask your questions during Lashawan Qadash class, and then Saturday, you can show up for Sabbath service. You can show up for Sabbath service. You know what I mean? Prepared to just, you know what I'm saying? Prepared to perform, right? So those are the 2 things regarding the characters: your penmanship, and for the sake of memorizing the characters, or you want to make sure you memorize the characters and work on your penmanship, right? The next thing is also the next thing you want to know is the pictographs, right? So you got your pictographs that lock you. So each Lashawan Qadash character has a pictograph, right? And each pictograph is associated with a word. Now, if you learn those 22 pictographs, because there's 22 characters, then that means you just learned 22 words to add to your vocabulary. And some of them have more than one. So you can at least add 22 characters to your vocabulary just learning these pictographs. So you got A for Allah, Ba, Bayat, or A for Allah, which means cow, Ba, Bayat, which means house, Ga, Gamal, which is camel, Da, Dala, which is door, Ha, which is Hana, which is behold, right? So on and so forth, right? And learning those characters, committing them to memory, you just memorize 22 characters. Or 22 vocabulary words. Now you just built your vocabulary, right? Next thing, you got numbers, right? So knowing your numbers is also going to be a big part of your vocabulary as well. You know what I mean? So you got like we went over real quick. So you got your cardinal numbers, which is again 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. And then you got ordinal numbers. Ordinal numbers, which would be first, second, and third. So on, right? Right, and once you actually start trying to apply the Lashawan Qadash in speech or during Sabbath service, right? You're reading during Sabbath service, you're gonna see these cardinal numbers and ordinal numbers a lot, especially when you're reading through lineages, when you're reading Genesis, the you're gonna see these ordinal numbers. You're gonna see these ordinal numbers the first day, the second day, the third day, the fourth day, right? And you're gonna see these cardinal numbers. One, especially when you're talking about a brother's age or a sister's age, or a certain amount of time passing, it'll say like 40 and 42 days or something like that, and it'll say these characters. So your cardinal numbers would be Akkad, Shanya, Shalash, Arabah, Kamash, Shashah, Shabah, Shemawanah, Kashah, Aishara, right? Ordinal is a little tricky, right? A little tricky. Your ordinal numbers, like we went over, right? It's gonna be general rule, right? So you take let me see, for example. So you take a general rule, you're gonna add a ya, one of these characters that you'll see. It's lucky. It's marketing nothing. You'll see this character surrounding the last character. So like, for example, you'll see this character in the front of the last character and this character behind it. Let me show you what I mean, right? So for example, the number 6 is Shalash. So I'm gonna write it real big so you can see what I'm talking about. You got Shah, La, Shah, right? Shalash for 6, right? Now, when you see 6th, as in 6th place, the 6th day, right? You're gonna see it's not gonna say Shalash, or it might say day 6, or it might say day 6. So it'll be day will be Yawam, and then 6 will be Shalash. So you might get off easy, and it'll say, like in Genesis, the first couple ones, like 1, 2, 3, 4, so on. It says day 1 in the English, or in the Lashawan Qadash, where the English says the 6th day, the Lashawan Qadash says day 6, right? So you might get off easy that way, but throughout the scriptures, when you're reading further into the Old Testament, it'll say the ordinal number form, which would look like this. So instead of saying Shah, La, Shah to make Shalash, it'll have a Ya surrounding the last character, right? It's an easy way to remember it. So when you, as long as you know your cardinal numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? You can just add this rule, right? So instead of Shalash, it'll say Shalayashya, right? And that'll be 6th, right? And that's a general rule. So not all of them follow that rule, right? Not all of them follow that rule, but as you get familiar, you'll start to be able to, or as you start to read, you'll start to just be able to pick up on it, and just, it'll make you more fluent as you read, right? I recommend, especially the ordinal numbers, I recommend going and checking out that lesson, right? And getting, you know what I'm saying, sharpening up like on that part, so it's not so intimidating to brothers, right? We got ordinal numbers, cardinal numbers, what else? And then, as we just went over, who, what, when, where, why, right? And how. And committing that to memory. So once you got all of those things, right, that we just went over, then you got a good foundation of, you got an excellent foundation to start with as far as learning the Lashawan Qadash and being able to speak between one another. The step after that is just, you know what I'm saying, just doing the research, having your resources, knowing how to use those resources, and building on your vocabulary word by word by word. All right, so we're going to kind of touch on that a little bit today. with so now if you got all of these, you understand this formula, prepositions, possessives, roots, tenses. You got them all in your notes. You understand the ones that come most often, right, in the text, and then you understand your characters from eye to thigh. You understand the pictographs and the words associated with them. You understand your numbers. You understand who, what, when, where, why. Then at that point, now you're just adding. You could just move on and adding characters, right, or words to your vocabulary. So we're gonna move on to try to identify some of these root words, right, or Salakia, some of these root words, or some of these more specifically, some of these nouns, right? Some of these most common nouns that you're gonna see throughout the scriptures. Right. Like, bear with me 1 second. But you're gonna want to add these nouns to your tool belt as well, because like we went over earlier, it's important to understand who, what, when, where, why, right? It's important to understand who, what, when, where, why, right? Because that's the foundation of how we start conversation with one another, right? Well, also, when you start in that conversation, you know what I mean, 9 times out of 10 when you're talking to a brother, talking to a sister, it's going to start with who, what, when, where, why, and it's going to have a subject, which is where your prepositions and possessives come in, and it's going to have a noun and a verb. It's going to be a noun, a thing, person, place, or thing, and then what's being done to that person, place, or thing, right? What's the point? You know what I mean? So that's going to be that's what your sentence is going to consist of. So we just went over all these things, and if you remember that, you know what I'm saying? If you remember that list, or if you commit to studying that list and sharpening up on that list, that cheat sheet that I just gave you, then you already halfway there. Now we just getting the minor, the details, right? These words that we might not know, but we are gonna see them all throughout the scriptures, right? So you should have a sheet with the 100 most common nouns, 100 most common verbs. If you don't have it, it should be in your biblical textbook and workbook, I believe, right? Now 100 words is a lot to go through, right? 100 is a lot of words to go through, and it could be kind of tedious and mechanical trying to go through Allah, cow, ba, baya, house, and just going letter or word by word, and then you might go through this one by one, word by word, and then by the end of it, find that you haven't retained anything, right? So the easiest way to kind of build your vocabulary is to go through that list, or just go through your, you know what I'm saying, go through what you already know, but go through that list also, and kind of pick out the words that you're gonna most likely use, and you know what I'm saying, in speech when you're talking to one another, right? We're just gonna go over a couple of them real quick. a couple of these off the rip, you know what I'm saying, we should already be familiar with these. So we ain't gonna spend too much time on them. But just again, just to be able to identify what you already know, it'll make it easier to identify it during Sabbath service when you're reading it. Because we know these words like Father, Abba, right? We say these words too much to not know them, right? Mother, Ma, right? Child, we don't really use too much amongst each other, but you'll see it in the Lashawan Qadash during Sabbath service. So it'll be Yalad, right, for child, right? Man is Ayash. Woman is Asha. Son, Bun. Daughter, Bath. Right? Now, off the top of our heads, we might know these, you know what I'm saying? But once we read it in the Lashawan Qadash, we might get stuck on them because we're not used to seeing it, especially surrounded by other character or other, you know what I mean, other words and phrases that we're not so used to seeing. All right. But once you're able to identify these and commit them to memory, commit them to memory on sight, like as soon as you see it, like when we read the English, for example, like we don't just we don't go character by character, we don't go you know what I'm saying, character by character and then put it together. We just kind of see a word and we just know what it is, and we just go sentence by sentence. We just kind of flow through it, right? We don't go and the cow ran. No, we just and the cow ran, and we just kind of flow through it. If you commit these words to memory as far as seeing it like we do with English, then you could just flow through it in the Lashawan Qadash as well. Right? So it's going to be certain parts because this is new to us, right? Since we had our language taken from us and stolen from us, beaten out of us, right? This is going to be new to us, Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. Right? Even though this is our native tongue. So you're gonna stutter a little bit. You're gonna freeze up and get stuck in certain places. You're gonna have to pause and kind of try to use this formula to your best of your ability. But once you identify these characters, then it'll make certain things easy. Like, okay, I know what this root word is. I know it. I know the root word is Abba. So you see wa abanawa, it'll say, oh, well, I know the preposition is wa, which means and the possessive at the end is our. So, and our father, wa abanawa, right? Now you know a whole phrase because you know these sight words, right? So, Abba, father, mother, Amma, child, Yalad, man, Ayash, woman, Asha, and these are the same words for husband and wife. So husband will be Ayash, wife will be Asha, son Ban, daughter Ba, right? Now we're gonna get a couple words. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to spend too much time on this since we kind of already did touch on it a couple weeks ago as well. All right, just gonna put a couple words up here that we can kind of work on committing to memory as well. Just as well as we know father is Abba, and son is Ban, daughter is Bath, and just as well as we know Israel is Yasharala, and things like that, just as well as we know those words, it's a couple words that we can add to our vocabulary as well. We're gonna start with you know what I'm saying, of course these are words that we should also pretty much know off site as well. But we just gonna start with these so that we can kind of like work our way up to those, knowing those 100 most commonly used nouns in the scriptures. Because again, all of these words that I'm putting up here. These are on that sheet, and these are again the words that we use often with one another, often with the Lord's prayers and Psalms 83, Psalms 121, all of that, and Hakat, right? Prayer for the power, all of those things, right? And as we read through during Sabbath service. But again, we just gonna practice, or we just gonna go over them so that we can get used to seeing them and commit them to memory. Alright. So again, this is another list that we should already be familiar with. It wouldn't hurt to you know what I'm saying, just write it down so that you can kind of go through it and just commit it to memory. Right? Right? Commit it to memory on sight. Because again, knowing what it is and being able to say it, being able to say it is very different from being able to read it. Because you might find yourself, you know what I'm saying, you know a word, but then you see it in its usage in the scriptures, and you don't recognize it until you kind of fumble through it. And then you like, oh, I should have known that, right? earth, right? Especially during especially reading Genesis, the first couple chapters of Genesis, you're gonna see these words as well, right? So we know Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, the Most High created the heavens and it says in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, right? So that's one of the first characters this is the first words that you're gonna see in Genesis if you're reading the Lashawan Qadash during Sabbath service, right? So we got earth. You're gonna see this right here, Arataza, right? Earth, Arataza, right? Heaven, right? Shamayama, right? Shamayim, right? Water, Mayum, right? Now with water being Mayum, having Shamayim, then you start to see how words are formed, right? Or how words are built off of one another. So the word heaven is built off of the word water because the heavens, or what we understand as like space, right? Similar characteristics and properties to water. So the heaven is Shamayim, water is Mayum. So that prefix Sha, or that preposition Sha, means which or pertaining to. So Shamayim is heaven or pertaining to water, right? This is also where you get sea from, which is Yum, right? Sea is Yum, right? So with that being said, you could break down water even further by taking Ma, right? Ma is a prefix that means of or from, right? So water is from the sea, right? So Mayum comes from the root word yum, which is sea. Water is from the sea, right? Tree, I-taza. Put it together, I-taza. Tree, right? You're going to see these things in Genesis, the first couple chapters of Genesis, right? And then you got day, Yawam, and night, which is Layala. Right? You're going to see all these things, you know what I'm saying, as you read them through, and as you get more comfortable, right, as you take more notes, as you take more concise notes, as you attend Sabbath service, as you attend Lashawan Qadash class, you're going to start to, or as you practice on your own, as you practice at home, going over this list that we're putting together right now, then you're going to start to see your vocabulary build, and you're going to start to see your speed start to pick up, especially during a Sabbath service or during feast day services, right? When we're reading that Lashawan Qadash, you'll start to just recognize things, so you don't have to struggle or like try to hone in and try to like pinpoint every little detail. You'll just see that cluster, just like we're reading English. You'll see that cluster of characters, and you'll say, okay, that's Aitaza, tree, or that's Arataza, earth, that's heaven, Shemayim, that's water, Mayum. All right, you'll just be able to read it off top, right, and just start to flow through and become more fluent. So we're gonna just practice those things. Just practice. Just read through that list of words that I gave you today. Try to commit it to memory, and then we're gonna build our vocabulary from there, right? We're gonna try to build our vocabulary from there with the next class. We're gonna add to our vocabulary. All right, and then as we start to build our vocabulary, then we're gonna move on to trying to use these words in sentences, right? So when you got this list at home, right, it wouldn't, you know what I'm saying, it wouldn't be a bad idea. I strongly advise brothers and sisters to practice using these words in sentences, using these words and attaching a preposition to it, attaching a possessive to it, and attaching a tense to it, doing tense, or whatever you got to do. We're adding adding your tenses, adding your prepositions to it, adding your possessives to it, adding your tenses to it, just adding it, using it in the sentence, adding it to who, what, when, where, why, using it with your question words and trying to form as, you know what I'm saying, you can start with small sentences, right? Start with small sentences or small phrases, like if using your prepositions and possessive, that's going to create a small phrase for you. Or, and then once you get familiar with that, try to make it as, try to string together as, what's the word? As, you know what I'm saying, get creative with it. Try to get, you know what I'm saying, try to form bigger sentences with it, bigger phrases. You know what I'm saying? More particular questions. And then see what you can come up with. But it's important to just practice using what we already got and what we already know and what we're learning in class so that we don't lose what we already know and what we learned, and so that we can take this language, so we can take our culture back, right? With that, we go ahead salute out. With that, Shalom Yahweh Shem Yahshua Baruch Thumb to all the brothers, and Shalom Yahweh Shem Baruch Thumb to all the sisters.